The contraction ripped through me like lightning as my mother-in-law's pen scratched across the birth certificate form. Even through the haze of labor pain, I could see her writing, Harold Eugene Morrison III, in careful cursive, as if the baby trying to make his entrance into the world was already her property. It's tradition. Eleanor screamed when the nurse tried to take the form away. Every firstborn Morrison male has been Harold Eugene for 6 generations. I gripped the bed rails, breathing through another contraction while watching this 60-year-old woman in her St. John's suit physically wrestle a medical professional for paperwork. My husband Paul stood frozen by the window, his spine having apparently dissolved sometime between conception and delivery. Mrs. Morrison, the elder Mrs. Morrison, the nurse corrected herself, glancing at me apologetically. You can't fill out official documents for another person's child. I'm the grandmother, Eleanor declared, clutching the papers to her chest. I have rights. Tell her Harold. Harold Jr., my father-in-law, stepped forward from the corner where he'd been silently supporting his wife's insanity. Now, let's all calm down. Tradition is important, but perhaps we should wait until after the baby. No waiting. Eleanor cut him off. They'll try to sneak some modern nonsense name onto it. Like that list I found in their nursery. Liam? Oliver? Those aren't Morrison names. I smiled through the pain. The same serene smile I'd been wearing for the past 9 months as she'd steamrolled every decision about my pregnancy. The smile that had made her increasingly nervous, though she couldn't quite figure out why. Paul, I said calmly between breaths, could you please call security? My husband startled like I'd suggested he set himself on fire. Security? Honey, that's not necessary. Mom's just excited. Paul. My voice dropped to what my best friend called my courtroom tone. Before this pregnancy, I'd been a family law attorney specializing in custody disputes. Call security. Now. You can't have me removed. Eleanor shrieked. I'm family. This is my grandchild. My Harold Eugene III. Another contraction hit, and I let out a laugh that was half pain, half genuine amusement. Oh, Eleanor. You have no idea what's about to happen, do you? What's that supposed to mean? She narrowed her eyes, still clutching the birth certificate forms like a life preserver. The door opened, and Dr. Patricia Chin entered, followed by 2 security guards and a woman in a sharp gray suit. My labor and delivery nurse looked relieved. Mrs. Morrison, Iris Morrison, Dr. Chin clarified, using my first name pointedly. How are we progressing? 8 centimeters, I managed. And we have a situation. I see that. Dr. Chen's eyes took in Eleanor's defensive posture and the crumpled forms. Mrs. Morrison Sr., I'm going to need you to return those documents. They're legal forms that only the birth parents can complete. I have rights. Actually, the woman in the suit stepped forward. You don't. Rebecca Winters, Hospital Legal Counsel. Mrs. Iris Morrison filed an injunction 3 months ago specifically barring you from making any medical or legal decisions regarding her child. The room went silent except for my controlled breathing. Paul's face had gone pale. Iris? What's she talking about? The same injunction, Rebecca continued, pulling out papers, that includes sworn affidavits from 17 different witnesses regarding your attempts to control this pregnancy, including trying to change the birth plan, attempting to cancel prenatal appointments to schedule ones with your preferred doctor, and forging consent forms for unnecessary medical procedures. I never, Eleanor started. June 15th, I recited between contractions. You called my OB pretending to be me and tried to schedule an elective C-section because, and I quote from the recorded call, Morrison babies are too important to be born naturally like commoners. You recorded? The doctor's office records all calls for liability purposes. When they realized it wasn't me, they filed a report. I gripped Paul's hand as another wave hit. July 2nd, you attempted to have me involuntarily committed for pregnancy psychosis because I wouldn't agree to name the baby Harold. You were being irrational, Eleanor defended. The psychiatrist disagreed. Quite strongly, actually. He suggested I look into restraining orders. I smiled that smile again. So I did. Paul. Eleanor turned to her son. Are you going to let her treat your mother this way? Paul opened his mouth, but I squeezed his hand hard enough to crack bones. Paul's going to let me deliver our child in peace. Aren't you, sweetheart? He looked between his mother and his wife who was currently in labor and had apparently been playing legal chess for months, and for once made the right choice. Mom, I think you should go. I'm not going anywhere, Eleanor declared. Not until my grandson is properly named. It's tradition. It's heritage. It's kidnapping, I finished calmly. Everyone froze. Excuse me? Harold Sr. finally spoke. Read Section 3 of the injunction, I told Rebecca, who obliged. Any attempt to circumvent the biological parent's rights to name their child, including but not limited to filling out birth certificates, filing fraudulent documents, or attempting to take custody based on naming disputes, will be considered attempted kidnapping and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. That's ridiculous, Eleanor sputtered. You can't kidnap your own grandchild. You can if you're planning to file for emergency custody based on parental unfitness, I said conversationally. Like the paperwork you had your lawyer draw up last month claiming I was mentally unstable for refusing to follow Morrison family traditions. Paul's head snapped toward his mother. What? I also have the text messages between you and your sister, I continued, breathing through another contraction. The ones where you discussed having me declared incompetent so Paul could make all decisions about the baby, including the name. You went through my phone? Eleanor was practically purple. No, your daughter-in-law Stephanie sent them to me. Apparently, she's tired of you trying to control her kids too. She's the one who warned me about your plans. That ungrateful. 10 centimeters, the nurse announced after checking. We're ready to push. Excellent timing, Dr. Chin said. Security, please escort the elder Morrisons out. Ms. Winters, please stay. I believe you have some documents for the new parents. As security moved toward Eleanor, she made one last desperate attempt. The birth certificate. I already filled it out. With a name that doesn't exist, I said, bearing down as the urge to push overwhelmed me. There is no Harold Eugene Morrison Jr. You've been so busy trying to force tradition. You never bothered to check your own husband's legal name. Eleanor froze. What are you talking about? Harold Sr. went very still. Tell her, Harold, I said between pushes. Tell her what your real birth certificate says. The one you thought was lost in that fire 40 years ago. The one I found when I did a title search on your properties. Harold. Eleanor's voice was small now. My name, he said quietly, is actually Gerald Howard Morrison. My mother filled out the form wrong and never corrected it. So you see, I panted, managing one more smile, there is no Morrison naming tradition. Just a 60-year-old clerical error, and a family too embarrassed to admit it. Push, Dr. Chin commanded, and I did, pouring all my frustration and rage and triumph into bringing my child into the world. Eleanor was screaming something about betrayal and tradition as security dragged her out. Gerald followed, looking defeated. Paul stood shell-shocked beside me, finally realizing the extent of his mother's deception and my preparation. I'm sorry, he whispered. I should have protected you from her. Yes, I agreed, pushing again. You should have. That's why Rebecca has divorce papers in her briefcase too. Just in case you didn't support me today. Iris. He looked genuinely hurt. Marriage counseling. I ground out between pushes. Starting next week. Non-negotiable. Your choice if you want to save this marriage, but either way, our son will have the name we choose. One more big push, Dr. Chin announced. I bore down with everything I had, and suddenly, the room filled with the most beautiful sound, my son's first cry. It's a boy, Dr. Chin announced, placing him on my chest. Healthy and perfect. Through tears, I looked down at my son. Mine and Paul's, not Eleanor's, not tradition's. Mine. What's his name? The nurse asked gently, preparing the real birth certificate. I looked at Paul, who was crying too, finally understanding what he'd almost lost. He nodded at me, deferring completely to my choice. James Oliver Morrison, I said firmly. After my grandfather who taught me to stand up to bullies, and my brother who showed me that family is about love, not control. That's beautiful, Rebecca said, making notes. I'll file this immediately. The injunction stands. Your in-laws aren't allowed within 500 feet of the baby until they complete court-ordered therapy and parenting classes. Parenting classes? Paul asked. But they already raised kids. And look how well that turned out, I said pointedly. You couldn't even stand up to your mother while I was in labor. He winced but nodded. Fair point. As the nurses cleaned up and Rebecca filed the paperwork, I held my son, James, not Harold, and felt the weight of victory. 9 months of planning, documenting, and preparing had led to this moment. How long have you known? Paul asked quietly. About Dad's name? Since month 4. I hired a private investigator when your mother started getting really pushy about the name. Found out all sorts of interesting things about the Morrison family traditions. I adjusted James's tiny hat. Like how your great-grandmother Helen refused to name her son Harold and only gave in after your great-grandfather threatened to have her committed. Or how your Aunt Patricia legally changed her daughter's name the day she turned 18 to escape being Haroldina. Jesus, Paul muttered. Your family history is full of women who were bulldozed by this fake tradition, I continued. I decided James wouldn't be another victim. And neither would I. I'm proud of you, he said, and seemed to mean it. And terrified of you, but mostly proud. Good. Remember that feeling the next time your mother tries to steamroll our decisions. I looked him in the eye. Because if you don't protect our son from her manipulation, I'll protect him from both of you. The divorce papers are real, Paul. This is your one chance. He nodded soberly. I understand. I'll do better. I promise. Time would tell if he meant it, but for now, I had won the most important battle. James would grow up free from the weight of manufactured traditions and the kind of grandmother who saw children as possessions rather than people. My phone buzzed with a text from Stephanie, my sister-in-law and unexpected ally. Heard security had to drag Eleanor out screaming about tradition. Name: James Oliver Morrison. I typed back. No Harolds in sight. Beautiful. I'm telling Patricia about the lawyer you recommended. She's ready to file for protection too. Eleanor's reign of terror is officially over. I smiled, looking down at my son. He'd started a revolution just by being born, by having a mother who refused to bow to false traditions and a name that belonged to him alone. Welcome to the world, James, I whispered. May you always be brave enough to be exactly who you are, not who others demand you to be. He yawned, tiny and perfect and free. And somewhere in the hospital, probably being escorted to her car by security, Eleanor Morrison was learning that the real tradition in this family, the one I was starting, was protecting our children from anyone who would try to control them, even if that someone was Grandma.